What if I told you that bombing a girls' school was actually not the first time the US killed classroom-sized numbers of Iranian kids? Because decades earlier, the US military shot down an Iranian passenger plane and killed 290 people. July 3rd, 1988, Iran Air Flight 655 takes off from Iran's Bandar Abbas airport for a short flight to Dubai. Early on, the plane was climbing along its standard route. Below, the USS Vincennes was passing through the Strait of Hormuz. 7 minutes in, airport controllers hand the crew off. "Have a nice flight," they say. 15 seconds later, the US ship fires missiles at the plane. The plane explodes and immediately disintegrates into pieces. 274 passengers, 16 crew members, 254 Iranian people, 13 Emiratis, 10 Indians, 6 Pakistanis, 6 Yugoslavians, 1 Italian, 65 kids, and 0 survivors. US officials said the crew thought the plane was an attacking Iranian fighter jet, ignoring warnings and descending rapidly toward the ship. But the plane wasn't descending, it was steadily climbing, still early on its route used by passenger planes every day, and it was broadcasting a civilian signal. On the other hand, it was the US ship that was sailing within Iranian waters, which the US only later admitted. 8 years after the attack, the US agreed to a deal to end the case at the International Court of Justice. They would pay just a little under $62 million to the victims' families and would not admit liability. No one was held accountable. George H.W. Bush, who was vice president at the time, seemed to have very little remorse for the situation.
"I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are."
That attitude is what leads to today, where so many of us have not even heard of this, something that, for the rest of the world, especially Iran, is unforgettable. There's a fog of impunity and hubris poisoning the government, a cockiness that many Americans can feel from the people in charge. This sense that because it hasn't faced consequences before, the US thinks, or at least the people in charge, it never will. And that arrogance leads to, at best, more terrible mistakes, or at worst, horrific crimes. The US maintained that the attack on Flight 655 was a mistake. Even if it was remarkably reckless. Today, we confront another fatal act. On the first day of its so-called liberating war with Israel against Iran, the US struck a girls' school and killed nearly 200 people, most of whom were little kids. And just like with Israeli strikes of hospitals, tent camps, and more, when you ask whether the strike on the girls' school was a mistake or intentional, both answers are troubling. If it was intentional, the moral stakes are self-evident. But if it was a mistake, when the most powerful military on earth, on its very first day of another new war, killed more than 100 little girls, how much can you trust it on other military actions? Or really, on anything at all?
This is what Trump's pastor, Franklin Graham, said today in a presidential inauguration prayer.
Father, you tell us in the book of Esther that the Persians, the Iranians, were wanting to kill every Jew, woman, child, and do it all in one day.
So let's try to fact check this, because the villain in the book of Esther is not the Persians. It's one man named Haman, and the Bible itself calls him an Agagite, a descendant of Israel's ancient enemy, the Amalekites. In fact, the Greek version of this very same story calls him a Macedonian. He manipulates the Persian king into signing a decree, and when Queen Esther revealed the plot, the Persian king had Haman executed, then reversed the decree, and the Jews were saved. The Persian Empire protected the Jewish people. This is what the book of Esther actually says. But it gets worse, because you want to talk about Persians and the Bible. Let's talk about Cyrus the Great, a Persian king mentioned 23 times in the Old Testament, which calls him God's anointed one, the only non-Jewish person in the entire Bible to receive that title. Not a prophet, not a disciple, a Persian king. Cyrus ended 70 years of Jewish captivity in Babylon. He didn't just free them, he paid out of the royal treasury to rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. He returned the sacred gold and silver vessels that had been stolen. He issued a decree protecting Jewish worship across his entire empire. The Jewish people called him a righteous king. God called him his shepherd. And here's what really needs to make you stop and think about what's actually happening, because this is not just a bad Bible interpretation. This is scripture being used to set the tone for foreign policy. They're using a 2,500-year-old religious text to tell you who the enemy is. This isn't governance. This is not democracy. The United States of America has a constitution that separates church and state. We should all be terrified by what's happening. Every single one of us, regardless of your religion, of your politics, or your view on the war on Iran. This is how propaganda works. You take something ancient, something sacred, something most people probably haven't even read themselves, and you weaponize it. You launder a political agenda through scripture so it sounds like divine truth. This is not theology. This is a political weapon, racism, discrimination, and abuse dressed up in a prayer. And somebody has to say it.
We can cross to Washington, D.C. and speak with our correspondent, Fraser Jackson. So, Fraser, these were sort of kind of long posts there on social media. What else has Trump been saying?
Yeah, well, we were waiting to hear from Donald Trump, who was at a UFC fight in Miami when the news broke that the deal had fallen through, that there was no deal on the table between Iran and the US. But around 8 or so o'clock in the morning, Donald Trump taking to his Truth Social platform and announcing a naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. He said, "I have instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas." He also says that any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. And he then continued the military threats against Iran as well, saying, "Additionally, and at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran." So Trump here looking to flip the tables on Iran and cause them the same kind of economic hurt that they've caused the rest of the world, chiefly by cutting off their oil exports. That, of course, is a key driver of Iran's economy, but also it's going to be cutting off any imports to the country as well, whether that be food or medicine or technology or something. But Donald Trump's still there, leaving on the table the looming threat of restarting the bombing campaign on Iran as well. Trump says that the US is also beginning minesweeping operations in that area. Of course, we saw those 2 US vessels make their way through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. That was meant to be a preparatory kind of mission to see if, to kind of get the lay of the land, to see if a wider operation was possible. But of course, this move from the US president could also prompt Iran to lash out and restart its missile strikes as well on US regional allies and assets in the region. And of course, that ceasefire deal is currently still in place. But whether that will hold now that these deal talks have fallen apart remains to be seen.
Right, Fraser, as you mentioned there, this does call into question what happens to this ceasefire that's going on. What are the wider implications for the U.S. with all of this that's been happening?
Well, of course, in the region, it's going to impact Iran significantly. Like I mentioned, the oil being one of their main drivers of their economy, but it's also going to therefore have a ripple effect on the rest of the oil market as well, further impacting oil prices worldwide and by extension, petrol prices as well. That really has become a yardstick here in the United States for how people feel the economy is doing, and the fact that petrol in some places might go over $5 a gallon is really making people worry here. Of course, this is a midterm year, an election year here in the United States, and Donald Trump has long used the price of petrol again as a yardstick to beat his political opponents with, but now the shoe is on the other foot, and Donald Trump is the one in charge of the economy, and he has tried to get ahead of this by telling people that it's going to be a short-term economic pain for a long-term gain when it comes to Iran. But of course, that is easier said than done when people are feeling the pinch in their pockets, and we'll see whether they take that out on the Republicans at the voting stations when we get to the midterms in November.
We sacrificed 168 beautiful, innocent school kids, the best kids. Tremendous sacrifice. Nobody does sacrifice like we do. We did it for you, sir. Believe me, Val, it's huge.
More. I want more!
Okay, this old clip from 1987 of Trump claiming that he's going to run for president and there will definitely be a war with Iran. Now, is this proof that Trump's a time traveler or that the world is scripted? It's one of the two. You pick. Listen to this.
Because I'm running for the presidency. I'm here because I'm personally tired of seeing this great country of ours being ripped off.
But as far as Trump is concerned, our allies are only part of the problem. The real culprit is Iran.
Why couldn't we go in and take over some of their oil, which is along the sea?
How would you do that? Would you send in the Marines? Would you take a chance in a war?
Let them have Iran. You take their oil. That's what
how?
How?
I mean, do we want a war? What do we take their oil?
You go in.
How do we go in?
You're going to have a war by being weak.
Okay, how do we go in? What do we do?
Excuse me. Yeah? You're going to have a war. And it's going to start in the Middle East.
What if the Soviet Union said, you do this to Iran, we're going to come in?
I don't believe they'd do it. The next time Iran attacks this country, go in and grab one of their big oil installations. And I mean grab it and keep it. And get back your losses, because this country has lost plenty because of Iran.
We Spartans are descended from Hercules himself, taught never to retreat, never to surrender, taught that death in the battlefield is the greatest glory he could achieve in his life. Spartans, the finest soldiers the world has ever known.
It's quiet now. They came from the blackness.
Be afraid! Sparta will burn to the ground! 1,000 nations of the Persian Empire descend upon you!
What must a king do to save his world?
Instead, ask yourself, what should a free man do?
Threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
stand and fight!
A new age has begun.
An age of freedom! And all who know that 300 Spartans give their last breath to defend it! Spartans! Tonight we dine in hell! Give them nothing, but take from them everything!